Hello again everyone, I'm Dave Thomas, and today I am building the Cerberus cluster model rocket from Rocketarium. And as we do with all of these, our first step is going to be opening this up and making sure all the parts are there. Alright, so we'll pull out our instructions here, and be careful, there may be things hidden in them like the parachute there. Alright, we are going to open this up. Oh, we've got some more decals. Alright, here's our parts list. Okay, so the decal and the orange strips, those are there. Parachute, right there. Okay, 2 sets of fins. So we've got a large set here, and it also includes a little applicator. Okay, a smaller fin set there. And then we have 2 body tubes here, a 16-inch one and a 14-inch. Nose cone. Okay, the stick, just showed that. Alright, and then we've got a small parts bag here that contains the shock cord and launch lug. Alright, ejection baffle kit. And then the cluster motor mount kit. Okay, so that looks like everything there. So I'm going to put most of this stuff aside and we will get started. The first thing I'm going to do is mark the fin lines here. And according to the instructions, this goes on the larger of the 2 body tubes. And the fin lines are going to go up roughly 1/3 of the way, and then the launch lug line will go up about 2/3. So we'll need to cut out the fin marking guide here, and this is on page 3. We just want to make sure there's nothing on the opposite side that's of importance, and there isn't. And if you don't want to cut up your instructions, you can just make a photocopy of this page and then cut it out. Alright, on my body tube, I am going to mark on the inside that this end is going to be the aft end, so I don't get it confused later on. Okay, and then we're just going to wrap this around until the 2 guide marks there are lined up. Just like that. And I'm going to use a little bit of masking tape here to hold that in place. And notice I am taping it to the body tube, and that just keeps it from moving around as we're doing this. Alright, then we're just going to make some marks here at each of the arrow points. I'm just going to mark an LL here so I know that's the launch lug line. Okay, then we can remove the masking tape and the fin marking guide. Alright, and now you can either take this to a door frame or a drawer edge, or I'm going to use this fin marking guide from Estes. And now we're just going to draw the lines here. So we'll go line up the tick marks that we just made. Alright, it's actually better to make your lines too long rather than too short. move ahead just a little bit here so we can find where the launch lugs are going to go. So one is going to go just right at the aft end here, so it'll be flush. And then the other one will be 9 inches from the aft end. Alright, so that's there. We actually need to extend our line a little bit more. Okay, trying this once again. So 9 inches would put it right there. Alright, now we can set that aside for just a moment, and we're going to move on to the motor mount. Now the motor mount kit comes with its own instructions here. Okay, and one of the other things here is that most of these sub-assemblies that come in their own packages, Rocketarium sells those by themselves. And so if you've got your own rocket that you are designing and building, and say you need a cluster mount, you can just order their kit rather than making your own. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is install the thrust rings on all of these. Okay, my tube's a little bit squished here. I'm just going to open those up a bit. Alright, so normally when we stick anything in a tube, we glue the tube first. But here I don't want to have excess glue down in the motor mount tube itself because it could interfere with the motor. Alright, so I'm going to apply glue to the ring there, a little bit to my finger. The finger part's optional. Alright, so this is just going to fit right in here. Okay, and this should be flush, so I'll just put that down like that. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing to the other 2 motor mount tubes, but do it off camera, and I'll be back. All of the thrust rings have been glued into the motor mounts here. Now, as we put these together, it says here in the instructions that there's no space for motor clips on these, so you have to use masking tape for a friction fit, and you can do that. If you want better retention, though, you can get a piece of number 4 threaded rod. I got mine through Amazon. Hardware stores may have this as well. And this needs to be about 8 centimeters long, which is what I've got marked here. Also, to do this, you need to drill this out just a little bit, enough so that the rod fits up through it. So I'm going to cut my rod and drill this off camera, and then we'll be right back. I drilled a 1/8 inch hole into the block here, and then here's my threaded rod, and I've got 2 nuts and 2 washers here that will go onto this here in just a moment. First I'm going to glue these tubes together. Okay, and when you're doing this, make sure that you get the right ends in place, otherwise you won't be able to load a motor. Alright, those motor mount tubes are a bit squished, but once we get done here, they'll be fine. So those are going to go together like that. I'm going to let those dry for just a few minutes here. In the meantime, I'm going to put on one set of washer and nut, and this will be the forward end. And here I'm using the end that I cut, just in case it's a little more difficult to put on and off. All right, and then I'm going to take a little bit of super glue here. You can also use permanent thread lock for this part. But I'm just going to glue that nut in place. Okay, then this whole thing is going to pass through the hole that we drilled. Just like that. Okay, and then we're going to take the motor mount tube and it's going to go on here. Now, it's going to need some glue yet, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. I want to make sure everything fits. So you should have about half of a centimeter here. I'm just going to back that out a little bit more here. So I'm just going to leave the nut flush there. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and glue the motor mount tubes onto the block there, and that bulkhead. Okay, now this is going to go down between the motor mount tubes, and then we should center that over each motor mount tube. So it looks about like that. Okay, now I'm going to back this out just a little bit here. Alright, I'm going to put some glue on the upper part of my threaded rod here to help glue it to the motor mounts. You don't necessarily need to do this all the way down, and you definitely don't want it where you're going to interfere with the threads on the other end of the retainer. Okay, so that's going to go like that. I'm going to put a dummy motor in here just so you can see what's going to happen next. So once you've got your motors loaded, when the kit's all done, then you'll have your washer and the nut right here. There we go. Okay, but with all three motors in place, then this will hold them all by the edge there, and that'll give you better motor retention than just relying on friction fit. Okay, now we'll come around here. This one looks like it slipped a little bit, so we're going to add some glue to there. There we go. Okay, the other ones look pretty good. That's got good glue in it there. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and take this back off just in case we do have some stray glue in there. Alright, I'm going to set this aside to dry. According to the instructions, our next step is to install the motor mount, but that's waiting for glue to dry. Alright, then the launch lug attachment, I prefer to do this after I get the fins on. And the reason for that is that I can use a fin alignment guide to help keep my fins straight, but I can't do it if I've got a launch lug in the way. So I'll do launch lugs after I do the fin attachment. So then bumping down here to the next step is assembling the baffle, and that's got its own instructions inside the sub kit. Alright, so we'll just go ahead and open this up. Okay, and here you should have 2 baffle plates. And there should be, oh, there it is, got caught in the bag. Alright, a screw eye there. Alright, so the first thing to do is to mount the screw eye in the first plate here. And I'm going to go ahead and do it from here. Oops. Okay, so start by just screwing this in. Alright, once you get the tip coming out here, go ahead and back that off again. And then we're going to take our glue once more. And I'm just going to apply a little blob of glue right there. Alright, and stick the screw eye back in. And I'm going to do this just until I've got a whole round of thread there. About right there. Okay, you don't want to do it all the way up to the non-threaded shaft. And then over here on the interior side, I'm going to add some more glue around the threads. There we go. Okay. Now we're going to put in a thick ring of glue inside one end of the baffle here. So I'm just going to take my glue once again. Alright, and this is going to be the other baffle plate that I'm using now. So that should go right into the glue. Just like that. Okay, turn it over and press it flush. Alright, and then for the other end, we're going to put a wide but thinner band of glue in here. So go ahead and just put some glue in there initially, and then you can use your finger to spread that around. So it looks like that. Okay, and now we're going to take this and you kind of mount it on its edge first, then come in and I'm going to give it a twist a bit here and then pull it back out and leave just like a millimeter or two interior space there. And then the excess glue, you can form a fillet all along the edge. Try and keep the glue out of the holes. Okay, and then once again, this can be set aside to dry as well. While glue is drying, we can turn our attention to the fins. These are plywood fins, 1/8 of an inch thick. And so they don't require as much sanding as balsa does. But I would go ahead and start with some 100 to 120 grit sandpaper. And you can use, I prefer just to use a block of wood here as a sanding block, like this. Okay, and first we're just going to sand the faces. basically you're done with the 100 grit once you sanded out all of the soot residue there. Okay, and then go to a 150 grit and do the same thing. And then finally to a 220 grit. Okay, so that's got a much smoother finish now. And you'll want to do this with all of the large fins as well as all of the smaller ones there. Okay, now in the instructions they show tapering this on the leading edge. You can also round it, or if you don't mind not going as high, you can leave it flat, square the way it is. Okay, if you're going to round or taper them, go back to your 120 grit sandpaper or 100 grit sandpaper. Okay, fine but not too fine. And start just by taking off the corners along the edges there. Okay, and just keep going back and forth till you get a taper. And they actually show you can draw a line that's 3/8 of an inch in. It's not quite that, but yeah. And then you can use that as a guide. So the way that would work, okay, so it's actually not a 3/8 inch taper, but we start it at 3/8 of an inch from the leading edge there. So if we take this here, 3/8 would be right there. Okay, and then you would just draw a line parallel to the leading edge there. Like that. Okay, and that gives you a guide as to how far back you need to taper it. So if we do the same thing here, there we go. Okay, now if you've got some skill with a rotary tool like a Dremel, you can actually do the initial shaping here with that. If you have a Dremel but not a lot of experience with it, I would suggest getting some scrap wood and practicing this first. But you can use the Dremel for at least the initial shaping here. It'll go a lot quicker. And then you can kind of fine tune it in by hand. And this is going to be true of all the fins here. Alright, they don't show anything for the small fins. You could taper them if you want, but I'm just going to leave mine squared off here as they indicate without any kind of sanding here. I will still sand the faces though. Alright, so I'm going to go off camera, and when I come back I should have my fins all sanded, a taper in the leading edge. You'll also want to kind of sand off the soot there. Okay, so I'll do all that off camera and then come back. Here I have all of my fins sanded. Now if that's as good as you want to do, then go ahead and we'll go on to the next step. Personally, I like to add some filling sandable primer to these, and it's easier to do that before you mount them than afterward. So I'm going to go ahead and prime and resand these things, and then we'll come back and put them on. The glue on the motor mount should be dry enough that we can install it. It is not completely dry, but it should be okay. Now I'm going to try fit this, and it's just a little bit tight there. And so something we can do is take the nose cone and use it kind of like a mandrel to just squeeze out the edge just a little bit there. kind of flared outwards. Okay, and then hopefully that will go in just like that. Alright, now according to the instructions, we're supposed to put 2 bands of glue in here, one at 1 inch and one at 2.5 inches. Right? Now the problem here is if you do that, you're just going to push that lower band of glue forward. So I'm going to do this a little bit differently. Now you can use the application stick that came with it. Okay, this thing here, it looks like a popsicle stick. I'm going to use a cotton tipped applicator just because it's a little bit longer. Alright, and then I'm going to take a ruler here and measure 2.5 inches. I'm going to put my thumbnail right at that point. Okay, I'm going to get a good blob of glue on there, but not dripping. Alright, I'm going to stick this up the middle, not touching the sides, till I get to my thumbnail. And I'm going to rotate that around in there. Right, I'm going to do it again, just to make sure we've got a good band of glue in there. Okay, and now I'm going to insert this part way. Alright, and actually I'm not quite sure what the second band of glue is supposed to do, as we don't have another bulkhead here. Okay, so we'll just put this in. And I'm going to turn it so that the launch lug line goes down between 2 of the motor mount tubes. Alright, now instead of putting the glue in the tube at 1 inch, I'm going to put it right around here. Okay, now you don't have to get down far into that crack there, as it's not going to come into contact. And I'm going to push this the rest of the way in until it's flush. Alright, I'm just going to wipe away any excess glue. Make sure there's no glue getting down into the motor mount tubes there. Now just as I was setting this aside to dry, I noticed that it keeps trying to collapse the motor mount tubes there. So I'm going to take some spent engine casings. I'm just going to put those in about halfway down. Alright, and this is one of the reasons why we don't want any glue down in there. Alright, now I'll let that dry. While I'm waiting for primer and glue to dry, I'm going to turn my attention to the nose cone here. And as you can see, this is a molded nose cone, and it's got seams on 2 sides here. Now in the instructions they tell you just to sand the whole thing with 220 grit sandpaper, and you should. But if you want to get rid of these seams a bit better, I would start with 150 grit and then move to the 220. But either way, do finish with 220, as it's going to allow the paint to adhere better. Okay, so I'm just going to sand, first of all, the seam here with 150 grit. what this has done is to knock down the edges of that seam. Now there are some little valleys in here, and some of that will still get sanded away when we move to the 220. But if you want something more to fill that in, you can use some plastic model contour putty, and it just goes on with the finger there, and you just let it dry and sand it. Mine's not that noticeable, so I think I'm just going to sand it with the 220 and call it good. So it's pretty uniformly sanded there. And it looks rougher, and it is. But again, once you prime and paint this, it's going to look really well. I'm going to take just a little bit of alcohol here. You can also just use water. Just alcohol dries faster. Okay, and just remove any of the sanding dust from this. Okay, and then I'm going to take this aside to prime and paint this, and then when we're ready to do the final assembly, we'll attach this to the shock cord and the parachute. We're still waiting for glue to dry on the motor mount and for the primer to dry on the fins. So I'm now going to turn my attention to the upper body tube and installation of the shock cord. Now the first thing we need to do is install, or not install it yet, but mark the baffle here. So just take your ruler and find the center. So this is about 5 centimeters. It's probably actually about 5.1, but we'll go with that. So half of that's going to be 25. There's our halfway mark. Now the screw-eye portion of this is going to go into the aft section of the tube. And once more, I'm going to go ahead and write that in my tube so I don't get something wrong later. All right, I'm just going to dry fit this. So that will go in until we get to the mark there. And then later we'll glue this part into the lower body tube. Now according to the instructions, you're going to tie this elastic shock cord onto here with a double knot, and then just put a little glue on the knot to hold it in place. This part is optional, so I've got about a 60 centimeter long piece of Kevlar shock cord here. And first of all, I'm going to take my super glue here, and I'm going to just put a little bit on the ends so they don't fray anymore. I can just take a tissue here and wipe off the excess quickly. Okay, now the Kevlar is less likely to break than rubber. I actually do like rubber shock cords. I think they do a better job of absorbing shock. But they also deteriorate over time, even if you've never launched it. So what I'm going to do here is put this short piece of Kevlar in. So I'm going to start by just making a double knot here, or 2 half hitches, if you remember that from Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. Okay, and just cinch that down really well. Now Kevlar doesn't hold knots well because it's kind of slippery material, and so we're going to put just a little bit of super glue right onto that knot there. Okay, and now when we feed this through, once again here I'm going to just dry fit this. So I'm going to stick that up from the aft end forward, so it's sticking out the other side here. Alright, and then this is going to get glued in to there. So this will have a little bit of Kevlar sticking out of it, and then we can attach the rubber shock cord to the Kevlar. And then if our rubber shock cord deteriorates and we need to replace it, we don't have to cut this open to get back down to that screw eye. Instead, all we need to do is just cut off the old rubber, put on new ones, and tie it in place. Okay, and I'll show you how I'm going to tie that here in just a little bit. First, let's go ahead and get this part done. Now here I'm going to use an applicator, and again you can use the stick applicator that came with the kit or something else. And this is just so I don't have glue dripping, because we don't want to get glue all over the shock cord here. But white glue or wood glue is fine. Alright, and here I'm going to put a bead of glue right on the inside edge. Alright, and you want it to be enough to cover everything, but not so much that it's making gluey blobs all over it. Okay, now you won't be able to see this for just a moment. What I'm going to do is drop the shock cord straight down here while avoiding the glue. Okay, so like that. And now we're just going to put the coupler in, give it a twist as we go through that glue there, and like that. Okay, and now I'm just going to take this end. I'm actually going to hang this on a hook so that it's dangling like this, and it'll keep that out of the glue. Here are the fins after the filling primer has been applied. And now I'm going to take some 220 grit sandpaper and just sand these down again. Now you will want to have extra sandpaper on hand because this primer does really clog up the paper. So now the low spots still retain the primer there, and the high spots we've sanded off. And so this gives us a very fine finish. And you can even repeat this. So you can give it another coat of the primer and sand it down again. I'm probably just going to leave mine the way it is here. I'm going to do all of the other fins off camera in the same manner. My fins have been sanded and we're almost ready to put them onto the rocket. We're going to need to mark our fin lines here. And we need a mark on each one at 1/4 inch and then another one at 1 3/4 inches. Okay, so we're just going to move this around here. 1/4 inch and 1 3/4 inches there. Okay, do the same thing as we go around. So the smaller fins will have its aft edge aligned with that mark, and the forward fins will go on that mark. And here I'm just going to take a little bit of sandpaper and just roughen up the region where the fins are going to attach. And it just takes a few strokes here. You don't need to really gouge down into this. Alright, I'm going to put the small fins on first. here I'm going to use some wood glue and start by simply putting a thin bead of glue on here. We don't want a whole lot. This is a case where less is better. All right, but a nice even film there. And then I'm going to put that on my line, getting everything lined up here. And I'm going to pull it back off again, and I'm going to wait 30 to 60 seconds and allow that to get tacky. 30 seconds have passed, and now I'm just going to put this right back where I had it. And now with that glue a little bit tacky, the fin can stand on its own there. You just need to make sure everything's aligned correctly. Okay, and then I'm going to let that wait for about 10 minutes and then continue around the rocket with the small fins. And I'll do that off camera. The small fins are all glued on. And now I'm going to use this fin alignment guide here to make sure that the forward fins are in alignment with the aft fins. Now you can just do it by hand. So here I'm going to move this up a little bit, and just like we did with the smaller fins, we're going to add a bead of glue on here. Okay, and again, we just want a thin film. Okay, and we're going to apply this on our line. Okay, and check our mark there. And once again, we're going to pull that back off again and let that get tacky for a little bit. Okay, my glue has had time to get tacky, so I'm going to go ahead and put this back on the line. Alright, and now I'm going to slide this down. So that I make sure we are in proper alignment there. And then just as before, we're going to let that dry for about 10 minutes before going on to the next one. And I'll do those off camera as well. The glue on my fins is mostly dry enough that we can work with this now. And so I'm going to apply glue to the launch lugs and stick them on. Alright, this is kind of the same way we did with the fins, although you don't really need to get them tacky first. I'll just put some glue on there, and I'm going to do the aft one first. So it will be flush with the body tube. Okay, and then I'm going to sight down the rocket here, and the launch lug, the body tube, and the line should all be parallel. So they look pretty good there. Then we'll do the same thing with the forward launch lug. Alright, and then we're going to sight down, having the aft launch lug also as a guide. And if you want, you can use a piece of launch rod and stick that through and make sure you've got good alignment. I usually get pretty good luck just with this. Okay, so everything's aligned. I'm going to allow that glue to dry, and when that's finished, we'll be able to do the fillets for everything. The glue on my fins and the launch lug have dried, and so now I'm going to apply the fillets, and I'm doing this with wood glue as well. And I like to do 2 facing fins at a time, so I'm just going to run down here. Alright, and then get the little fin too, and then do the opposite one. Alright, and then I'm going to have a tissue or some paper towels handy to wipe my fingers off. I'm just going to smooth these in. got a little bit of glue making a blob there between the fins right there, so I'm just going to clean that off with the cotton applicator there. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing all the way around here and with the launch lugs. Alright, now I'm just going to let this dry horizontally, and we'll come back to start working on the upper part of the rocket.